This is the slide I was talking about earlier that I think is really helpful for understanding sleep needs and amount of sleep. So there's actually three issues. There's amount of sleep, timing of sleep, and regularity of sleep. And they're all important in sleep hygiene and sleep habits. And the way I explain it to parents in clinic is I actually show them this diagram and I talk about this first. So this dark line is this homeostatic drive to sleep. And what I say is that over the course of the day, this is alert, this is sleepy. We actually go from alert to sleepy. Here it is, I'm sorry. This is the dotted line here, the homeostatic drive. We go from alert to sleepy as the day goes on. And we get sleepier and sleepier. Something builds up in our bloodstream. We're not really sure what it is. People think it might be adenosine. Adenosine is actually a neurotransmitter or a brain chemical that caffeine competes with. So when we have a cup of coffee or a glass of tea or whatever, it actually obliterates this drive to get sleepier and sleepier as the day goes on. What's another thing that could obliterate our sleep drive and make us more alert that we could do during the day? Exercise, that's very good. Or a nap. And if you think about it, naps and exercise are kind of different in a way because exercise will actually make us sleepier after we exercise. And ultimately, when we go to sleep at night, if we've exercised, we're going to be more prone to go to sleep because we're more worn out. While a nap or caffeine does the opposite, we may be more alert, right? So that's why exercise is so good, is it keeps us awake and alert during the day, but it also allows us to continue to kind of prepare ourselves and get ready for bed. So that's the homeostatic drive to sleep. And the reason we don't fall asleep, let's say eating dinner or getting ready for bed, is because we have this other drive that kind of boosts us up, and that's the circadian drive. And that is that second wind that a lot of us experience. And when you combine the two, you get kind of this little bump called the forbidden zone. Sorry, I'm having trouble with the mouse. Here we go. And this is right about an hour before we're ready to go to sleep, we're more awake. We're fully awake. In fact, we're more awake an hour before we're ready to go to sleep, an hour before our natural bedtime, than we are at any other time during the day. So it's really important to time your sleep right, because if you put a child to bed too early, or we go to bed too early, we're actually less likely to fall asleep and we have more trouble. And that gets into that whole kid who can't fall asleep and they're fidgeting and they're restless and they're lying awake and they're anxious that they can't sleep. And that is detrimental to sleep. So finding the right natural bedtime and making sure that we don't go to bed too early can be really important. Now, how do you know when the right natural bedtime is? It's not necessarily that straightforward. You sometimes have to play around with it and try, different times. But the example I would use is, let's say that we normally go to bed at 10 o'clock at night and we have to catch a flight the next morning and we're going to bed at 8:30. We're going to go to bed super early, right, so that we're ready for the next day. And, we're lying awake in bed at 8:30, 9, 10, maybe even 11, maybe even after the time we normally would have gone to sleep, because our mind has been restless and ruminating and we've been trying to fall asleep when we can't fall asleep. So that's why picking the right bedtime is so important and trying not to pick it too early. And that's the whole concept of the timing of sleep. And then the regularity fits into the timing, because if you can go to bed at the same time every night, the brain learns when to secrete natural melatonin, right? And it gets into this groove and this habit. And the consistency is really important. That's where the teenagers who go to bed at 10 o'clock on a school night, or even earlier on a school night, and then they stay up till 2 a.m. on a weekend, are going to get into trouble because they don't have that consistency. And then the final thing is the amount, and that's what we talked about earlier, that in our quest for our kids to fit the books and have 11 to 13 hours of sleep if they're preschool and 9 to 11 hours if they're school age, we could be defeating the purpose because they actually get much less than that because we put them to bed too early and then they're not ready because of this diagram I showed you, and then they're awake. So I'm not necessarily advocating for kids having less sleep, but what I am advocating for is that we be a little bit more realistic and scientific, realistic and scientific at the same time, I guess. We understand these concepts. We make sure we're not putting our kids to bed too early. We realize that delaying bedtime from even something like 8 to 9 or 8:30 to 9:30 can do wonders for improving sleep. With the same token, there are family issues, and I was talking at lunch with several people about this whole idea that even though you say to a family, and it's so funny when I see a family, let's say I'll see the kid and the kid's 10 years old and very verbal, and I'll say, well, have you tried going to bed at 9:30? Have you tried having your child go to bed at 9:30 instead of 8:30 because they're lying awake and they can't fall asleep? And invariably, the child will give me this big grin, like, that sounds great. And then oftentimes it will be a child, but the parent won't, but I'll get to that in a minute. Oftentimes it will be one of these really verbal, kind of high-functioning teenagers with Asperger's who will say, Mom, I've been telling you this for years. Finally, the doctor agrees with me. I need to go to bed later. There you have it. But I think that what the parent is feeling is, how am I going to get everything done? How am I going to have some time for myself? How am I going to explain to Johnny's sister that who's typically developing at 8 years old, that she can't stay up till 9:30 or 10:30 or whatever we've decided? And what normally will happen is they'll just leave and they won't do anything unless you're astute enough to ask the question, which I now do routinely. I'm talking more to the therapists in the audience and the parents at this point. So do you think you think this is possible, or what concerns do you have about this? And then all of those concerns will come out. So this is something I've learned over the years is fraught with concern. Even if the child or the teenager is, yeah, the parent oftentimes has a lot of misgivings about delaying bedtime, especially with bedtime with school wake-up times having to be as early as they are, at least in the States. Our high schoolers have to wake up at 6 to get to the bus and all of that, and it doesn't bode well when you're trying to tell a parent to go for a 9:30 bedtime rather than an 8:30 bedtime. Yes, you have a question?
Does it relate to the time of year, like as far as how long the sun is out in the summer versus the winter?
That's a good question. Does it relate to the time of the year? Yeah. I mean, it relates to, first of all, being in school versus being out of school is huge. Parents are much more willing to do this when their child is out of school because then they can still get, or at least try to get their, whatever the books say they're supposed to get. So, putting a child to bed at 9:30 rather than 8:30 outside of the school year often works better. And then the other issue is with the light. Oftentimes, they realize it's really hard to put the child to bed earlier if it's still light outside. So what we may oftentimes do is capitalize on the summer as an opportunity to try this and see if it works. And then tell the parent that 2 or 3 weeks before school starts, we can always back it up. So let's say we move Mikey's bedtime from 8 to 9 or 9:30 for the summer, and now he's falling asleep within 20 minutes or half an hour. Now we back it up, right? So now he'll, a few weeks before school, we'll do 9, and then we'll do 8:50. A few days later, then we'll do 8:40, and we can actually maybe get it not back to 8, but maybe to 8:30, and then the parents are happy. That makes sense. The other thing we could do with Mikey is we can move he can still do his Angry Birds, but he's going to do it at 8, he's going to be done by 8:30, and then we're going to start a calming, soothing bedtime routine that gives him an hour between the time he turns off his video and the time he goes to bed.